marched in Yerevan, Armenia during an opposition demonstration that led to the arrest of 200 protesters.
The opposition parties accused Armenia's prime minister of plotting to give up a disputed region to Azerbaijan. More details on this later in the news. Good evening. I am CJ Hirro.
And I'm Nina Ricci, Alagao, Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. And now for the headlines. European Union announces plan to ban Russian oil imports as Moscow ramps up offensive in eastern Ukraine. North Korea fires suspected ballistic missile, according to South Korean authorities. Leaked Supreme Court opinion on abortions sent shockwaves across the United States. Taiwanese Star Wars fans celebrate the unofficial holiday in costumes. And Malacanang thanks Iglesia ni Cristo for choosing Bongbong Marcos and Sara Duterte tandem. As the EU moves to punish Moscow with oil sanctions, Russian forces have launched a major assault on the holdout Azovstal steel plant in Mariupol and pounded sites across eastern Ukraine. 3 months into the war, Moscow has focused its fresh offensive on Ukraine's east and south. Western allies, on the other hand, continue to provide Kyiv with cash and weapons in a bid to force Russian leader Vladimir Putin to pull back. Local authorities reported that in one of a series of assaults last Tuesday, the 21 civilians were killed and another 28 were wounded in the eastern Donetsk region. Regional Governor Pavlo Kirilenko said 10 of the 21 dead were killed in the shelling of the Avdiivka coke plant, one of Europe's largest. He called it the highest daily death toll since a Russian strike on a train station in Kramatorsk about a month ago. As Russia's renewed campaign in eastern Ukraine intensified, EU officials on Tuesday handed a draft plan to member states on a new package of sanctions aimed at Moscow. But several EU officials and European diplomats in Brussels told AFP there were divisions, with at least one member state jockeying to opt out of an oil embargo. Ambassadors from the 27 European Union countries will give the plan a once-over, and it will need unanimous approval before going into effect.
Russian President Vladimir Putin discussed the situation in Ukraine with his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron. He insisted that the West should stop sending arms to Kyiv. Putin, who was speaking in his first telephone talks in months with Macron, pointed out that the EU member countries ignore the crimes committed by the Ukrainian forces, including the massive shelling of the Donbas region and the resulting civilian casualties. The Kremlin quoted the Russian president as saying the West could help stop these atrocities by influencing the Kyiv government as well as stopping arms deliveries to Ukraine. Putin also told Macron that Russia remains open to dialogue despite all the inconsistencies in Kyiv's position and its unwillingness to take this process seriously. The two presidents agreed to maintain contact at various levels. In a statement by Elysee Palace, Macron called on Putin to stop an end to Russia's war of aggression and said he was ready to help achieve a negotiated solution to the conflict that respected Ukraine's sovereignty. Now, Macron, who won re-election last month, has spoken to Putin several times since Russia's conflict with Ukraine. The French president said he was available to work with competent international organizations to help lift Russia's blockade of Ukraine's Black Sea ports so it could resume food exports.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken voices regret that not more people have been evacuated out of Mariupol. Russian forces launched a...
And my understanding is that the shelling and targeting and rocketing of people who are trapped in this factory area has resumed. Mariupol is front and center in the news for so many people. It continues to be contested, and simply put, people need to be allowed out. We've seen efforts over the last couple of months to have humanitarian corridors to allow people to exit. In virtually every instance, those corridors have not held up because Russia has not abided by the commitments that it made.
Russian forces launched a major assault Tuesday on the Azovstal steel plant, the last holdout of Ukrainian forces in the devastated southern port city of Mariupol. 101 civilians trapped at the site for weeks have been finally brought to safety.
In a speech to Ukraine's parliament, President Volodymyr Zelensky thanked the United Kingdom, Europe, and the whole world for supporting the country in its conflict with Russia. In particular, Zelensky was thankful for the words, actions, and help they are getting, as well as the victory he said they were sure to get. He also warned of an unpleasant surprise that awaits the aggressor. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin tells French counterpart Emmanuel Macron the West must stop supplying weapons to Ukraine. Putin accuses Kyiv of not taking talks to the end of conflict seriously. Accusing Ukrainian forces of committing war crimes, Putin tells Macron the West could help stop these atrocities by putting relevant pressure on the Kyiv authorities.
North Korea fired a ballistic missile toward its east coast, according to South Korea's military. Pyongyang's missile launch came in about a week after the North said it would develop its nuclear capabilities at the fastest possible speed. Seoul's Joint Chiefs of Staff, or JCS, said it detected the launch at about 12 o'clock or 12:03 p.m. from the Sunan area of Pyongyang. Japan's Coast Guard also reported the launch and said it could be a ballistic missile. The JCS reported the missile flew 470 kilometers at a top altitude of 780 kilometers and speed of Mach 11. It urged Pyongyang to immediately stop the ballistic missile tests, which it criticized as a clear breach of UN Security Council resolutions and a grave threat to peace on the Korean Peninsula and beyond. The launch is the North's 14th weapons test this year. It comes before South Korea's newly elected president, Yoon Suk-yeol, is sworn onto office. Yoon is expected to take a more hawkish approach to the North than his predecessor, Moon Jae-in. In a text message sent to the media, the JCS said the military is tracking and monitoring related movements to prepare against the possibility of an additional launch, and it is maintaining a full readiness posture.
Malacanang thanked the Iglesia ni Cristo, or the Church of Christ, for its decision to unitedly vote for the Uniteam tandem of former Senator Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. and presidential daughter, Davao City Mayor Sara Duterte. In his regular press briefing at the palace, presidential spokesman Martin Andanar said they are extending their gratitude for the church's support to Mayor Sara. He said that as for President Rodrigo Duterte, he made it clear that he will remain neutral and will not support any presidential aspirants. Earlier, the president also vowed to ensure orderly, clean, and peaceful elections on May 9.
We thank the Iglesia ni Cristo for endorsing Davao City Mayor Inday Sara Duterte as to INC's endorsement of former Senator Marcos. We believe his spokesman had already issued a statement.
Senatorial aspirants who had been chosen to receive the united vote of the Iglesia ni Cristo or the Church of Christ expressed their gratitude for the support. Senate Majority Leader and re-electionist Juan Miguel Zubiri said he recognizes INC as a partner in nation building, which silently extends its help to the Filipino people through its various socio-civic programs.
Maraming salamat po sa mga kapatid natin sa Iglesia ni Cristo para sa suporta ninyo sa akin sa darating na halalan. At special thanks po sa tagapamahala ng Iglesia ni Cristo, si Ka Eduardo Manalo. Napakalaking karangalan po na matanggap ang tiwala ninyo at ng buong Iglesia. Kaya muli, maraming salamat po. Makakasiguro po kayo na bilang trabador nyo sa Senado, patuloy ko pong ibibigay ang lahat ng aking makakaya para paglingkuran ang bawat Pilipino. Anumang wika, estado sa buhay o pananampalataya. Muli, maraming salamat po.
Former General Guillermo Eleazar, Senator Joel Villanueva, and former Senator J.V. Ejercito also conveyed their heartfelt gratitude to INC.
Puso ko nagpapasalamat sa kapatiran ng Iglesia ni Cristo sa pamumuno ng pakalahatang tagmahala na si Ka Eduardo V. Manalo sa kanilang pasya na ako ay mapabilang sa mga kandidatong kanilang iniendorso sa darating na halalan. Isang malaking karangalan para sa akin na mabigyan ng pagkilala ang aking kwalifikasyon at kakayanan na pagsilbihan ng matapat, maayos at may puso ang ating mga kababayan na isa naman sa tunay na diwa ng paniniwala at pang-aral ng Iglesia.
At tunay na isa pong napakalaking karangalan ang maendorso sa pagkasenador ng buong kapatiran ng Iglesia ni Cristo sa pamumuno ng ating iginagalang, ipinagmamalaki at minamahal na Ka Eduardo V. Manalo. Ipagpapatuloy po natin ang ating krusada na gumawa at lumikha pa ng maraming trabaho bilang inyong testdaman sa Senado.
Nais ko po magpasalamat kina Ka Eduardo Manalo at sa buong kapatiran ng Iglesia ni Cristo sa inyong pagsuporta at pag-endorso sa akin. Naniniwala ako na marami pa tayong magagawa upang maibangon ang ating mga kababayan matapos ang mahigit 2 taon ng kaliwat kanang krisis sa ating bansa, lalo na ang pandemya.
Apart from the 4 senatoriables, the Iglesia ni Cristo also announced it will unitedly vote for Deputy House Speaker Loren Legarda, former Vice President Jejo Marbinay, former Senator Jinggoy Estrada, former House Speaker Alan Peter Cayetano, Sorsogon Governor Chis Escudero, Senator Sherwin Gatchalian, former DPWH Secretary Mark Villar, and actor Robin Padilla.
The Commission on Elections, or COMELEC, has collated more than 26,000 ballots from the local absentee voting it conducted ahead of the May 9 national and local elections. The ballots received by COMELEC reception and custody units arrived at the poll body's office last Monday. The ballots include those from government agencies and the media. The poll body approved more than 84,000 applicants for the local absentee voting held last April 27 to 29. These applicants will be the ones on duty during the conduct of the elections. Local media personnel who participated in the local absentee voting cast their votes at the COMELEC office in Intramuros. The ballots have been deposited in a secured room at the COMELEC headquarters and will be opened only on May 9 for the counting. Next on Mata ng Agila International. Leaked Supreme Court opinion on abortion sends shockwaves across the U.S. China's capital, Beijing, closes 10% of subway stations to stem COVID-19 spread. And in Ethiopia, worst drought in decades devastates the nomads. Find out more on these when Mata ng Agila International returns.
Is brought to you by 318.
Still watching Mata ng Agila International. COVID-19 cases in Puerto Rico are climbing since mid-March, around the time the island dropped its pandemic-related restrictions. According to the Johns Hopkins Coronavirus Resource Center, the country registered 26,273 new cases in the last week. While cases are still far from the highs seen during the Omicron variant surge in January, numbers have steeply increased after hovering around 200 new cases per day for much of March. Data showed that more than 80% of the island's population is fully vaccinated. The COVID-19 infections in Puerto Rico come after some health experts warned the U.S. to prepare for the possibility of a summer surge. Deborah Birx, a leading member of the Trump administration's White House Coronavirus Task Force, warned that people should be preparing right now for a potential surge in this summer across the southern United States. She added that natural immunity wanes enough in the general population after 4 to 6 months, and what a significant surge is going to occur again.
Beijing closed around 10% of the stations in its vast subway system. In a brief message, the subway authority said the measure to shut 40 mostly downtown stations is being taken as part of epidemic control measures. No date of resumption of service was given. Though Beijing recorded just 51 new cases, 5 of them asymptomatic, the city remains on high alert for the spread of COVID-19, with restaurants and bars limited to takeout only, gyms closed, and classes suspended indefinitely. Major tourist sites have closed their indoor exhibition halls and are operating at partial capacity. All businesses are closed except for supermarkets, and streets were practically deserted apart from delivery drivers on scooters. A few communities where cases were discovered have been isolated. People residing in controlled areas have been told to stay within city limits. Throughout the week, residents are required to undergo 3 COVID-19 tests. A negative test result obtained within the previous 48 hours is required to gain entry to most public spaces. Meanwhile, in Shanghai, another 4,982 cases were reported. 260 of them were asymptomatic, along with additional 16 COVID deaths.
The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention maintains its recommendation that everyone aged 2 and older properly wear a well-fitted mask or respirator in indoor areas of public transportation. It says masking is most beneficial in crowded or poorly ventilated locations. These include airplanes, trains, buses, and transportation hubs such as airports and stations. The CDC also encourages operators of public transportation and transportation hubs to support mask wearing by all people, including employees. The American Health Agency says masking keeps travel and public transportation safer for everyone. When people properly wear a well-fitting mask or respirator, they protect themselves and those around them. The public health recommendation is based on the currently available data that include understanding COVID-19's epidemiology, its circulating variants, and their impact on disease severity and vaccine effectiveness.
The possible reversal of the Roe v. Wade decision concerning abortion is the top news in the U.S. right now. The 1973 landmark ruling holds that access to abortion is a constitutional right. A leaked draft of a U.S. Supreme Court opinion ignited a firestorm that brought pro-life and pro-choice supporters face-to-face in Washington, D.C. The Supreme Court confirmed the authenticity of the leaked draft, which shows that the highest court is poised to abolish abortion rights in the U.S. U.S. President Joe Biden chimed in on such a possibility.
If the rationale of the decision as released were to be sustained, a whole range of rights are in question, a whole range of rights. And the idea we're letting the states make those decisions, localities make those decisions, would be a fundamental shift in what we've done. So it goes far beyond, in my view, if it becomes a law and if what is written is what remains. It goes far beyond the concern of whether or not there is the right to choose. It goes to other basic rights, the right to marry.
While many focus on the issue of abortion, what troubles instead Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell is the fact that the draft opinion was leaked at all.
The integrity and independence of the Supreme Court is once again under attack. Last year, the Democratic leader went over on the steps of the Supreme Court, called a couple of the members out by name, and actually threatened reprisals if they didn't rule the way he chose. And now we have, within the court itself, someone else threatening the independence of the court. You need, it seems to me, excuse the lecture, to concentrate on what the news is today. Not a leaked draft, but the fact that the draft was leaked.
On the other side of the aisle, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer mentions the steps he intends to take on the abortion issue. He said it is their intention for the Senate to hold a vote on legislation to codify the right to an abortion in law. This way, every American can see which side every senator stands on.
Fiji High Court Justice Dipti Amaratunga ruled that U.S. authorities can seize a Russian-owned super yacht, but he halted his order until at least this Friday, while the defense lawyers mount a challenge. Worth $325 million, the yacht Amadea had been ordered to stop from leaving Fiji because of its links to Russia. The pause order issued by Amaratunga prevented the U.S. authorities from taking Amadea to Hawaii or elsewhere. Earlier, the U.S. Justice Department announced the creation of a team of federal agents and prosecutors to pursue wealthy Russians or those aiding Russia. Called Task Force Klepto Capture, the team was set up to seize assets belonging to oligarchs and pressure Russia to end the war. The U.S. claims the real owner of the super yacht Amadea is Suleiman Kerimov, who was a former Russian politician sanctioned by the U.S. for alleged money laundering. But Amadea's defense lawyers claim the real owner is Eduard Kudainatov, the former chairman and CEO of the state-controlled Russian oil and gas company Rosneft. Kudainatov currently does not appear to face any sanctions, unlike wealthy Russians with close ties to Russian President Vladimir Putin, who have been sanctioned since the war began. For now, the super yacht continues to sit in a Fijian harbor, just waiting for the High Court's decision.
The leaders of Japan and Thailand announced a new defense agreement as well as plans to upgrade their economic relations. The announcement marked the end of Japanese Premier Fumio Kishida's three-nation tour of Southeast Asia. The signed agreement would facilitate the transfer of defense hardware and technology from Japan to Thailand, which has one of the biggest and most equipped armies in the region and a long history of ties with the U.S. military. Thai Prime Minister Prayuth Chan-o-cha said in a joint statement, read alongside Kishida, the agreements will help improve national defense and support investment from Japan in this activity, which is an important goal for Thailand. Prayuth discussed improvements in supply chains and the drafting of a 5-year economic partnership with Japan, Thailand's biggest investor. Southeast Asia is an important region for Japan as it hosts some of the biggest or its biggest brands, ranging from engineering and infrastructure to manufacturing of vehicles and electronics. Kishida's visit to Thailand coincides with the two countries' 135th anniversary of diplomatic relations.
The RAND Corporation, a think tank tasked with developing strategies for the Pentagon, claimed that none of the U.S. allies in the Pacific are currently willing to host intermediate-range missiles. Instead, the report's author advised that Washington should encourage Japan to develop a missile arsenal of its own in order to threaten Chinese ships. In the report, which RAND publicized, analyst Jeffrey Horning argued that the likely receptivity to hosting such systems is very low as long as current domestic political conditions and regional security trends hold, pointing specifically to Thailand, Australia, South Korea, the Philippines, and Japan. Horning said so long as Thailand has a military-backed government that shows a propensity to pursue closer ties with China, the U.S. wouldn't want to base missiles there, and the Thai would be unlikely to accept if asked. Horning also wrote the Philippines is also extremely unlikely to accept U.S. missiles, even though the Philippine public and elite generally support the U.S. and the alliance. President Rodrigo Duterte has pursued policies that negatively affect ties. The report also mentioned that South Korea, which has ties to China, is highly unlikely to consent to host U.S. missiles. The report concluded that although the missiles would not be capable of deep strikes into China, if they were deployed on Japan, they would be able to cover strategic ship movements, thereby extending the range at which Chinese assets could be held at war planning risk.
April is meant to be one of the wettest months of the year in the Somali region of Ethiopia. However, there has not been a drop of rain for the last 18 months, signaling the worst drought in decades for the region. Many of the animals belonging to the 200 semi-nomadic herder families in Hargodudo have perished. The same tragic story is being experienced across southern Ethiopia and in neighboring Kenya and Somalia. The United Nations reported that the worst drought to hit the Horn of Africa in decades is pushing 20 million people to starvation, destroying an age-old way of life and leaving many children suffering from severe malnutrition as it rips families apart. In Ethiopia, the eyes of the world have largely focused on the humanitarian crisis in the north caused by the war between government forces and the Tigray People's Liberation Front. But the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, or OCHA, estimates that up to 6.5 million people in Ethiopia, more than 6% of the population, are also severely food insecure because of the drought. OCHA said the situation has become alarming, with nearly 1.5 million head of livestock killed. Herds provide the nomadic or semi-nomadic populations of the arid and hostile region with food, income, and savings. But OCHA said the surviving animals have deteriorated so much that their value has plummeted, reducing the buying power of the increasingly vulnerable households. Coming right up, more than 200 protesters detained after demanding resignation of Argentinian premier. Afghan women defend right to drive as Taliban curb licenses. And impacts of Russia-Ukraine conflict begin to be felt in Latin America and Caribbean countries. Mata ng Agila International will return after this short break.
This portion is brought to you by Quezon City Motor Vehicle Inspection Center, Robig Builders.
Love is all about time.
Agila International. Police in Armenia detained more than 200 anti-government protesters as opposition parties upped the pressure on Premier Nikol Pashinyan over his handling of a territorial dispute with Azerbaijan. Protests erupted in Yerevan on Sunday, with the opposition demanding Pashinyan's resignation. He was accused of plotting to cede to Baku all the disputed Nagorno-Karabakh region, over which the two countries went to war in 2020. Fresh demonstrations took place on Monday, and on the following morning, police cracked down on protesters who blocked traffic in central Yerevan. The clash provoked chaotic scenes and the largest protests in the country since the elections last September. The Interior Ministry said 237 demonstrators were detained in Yerevan and several provincial cities. Later in the evening, several thousand opposition supporters marched in downtown Yerevan, waving Armenian and Karabakh flags and shouting, "Nikol, resign." Armenia and Azerbaijan have been locked in a decades-long dispute over Karabakh, Azerbaijan's Armenian-populated region. Armenia's security service had warned of a real threat of turmoil, but Pashinyan's ally and Parliament Speaker Alin Simonyan downplayed the risk, insisting there is no political crisis in Armenia.
In Afghanistan's most progressive city, Herat, women defend their right to drive after Taliban officials said they would stop issuing licenses to women. Shaima Wafa says driving her own vehicle is more comfortable than sitting beside a taxi driver. Zainab Mohseni fears the Taliban might stop women drivers at checkpoints just because they are women. She says it is unfortunate that the issuance of licenses to women has stopped. According to female driving instructor Adila Adil, the Taliban wants to ensure the next generation will not have the same opportunities as their mothers. When the Taliban occupied Afghanistan in 1996, women were prohibited to drive. Death was the penalty for anyone found in violation. After 2001, when Taliban rule in Afghanistan ceased, women were once again given the freedom to drive. But as the Taliban regains control, Afghan women fear they will again lose their right to drive, one of the many simple privileges in various parts of the world.
Panama's Foreign Minister Erika Moines warns that Central America and the Caribbean are the most vulnerable subregions of the Americas to rising food prices due to the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Moines adds this is because these subregions import almost all the cereals they consume. During a meeting with EU Representative Josep Borrell and the sub-region's foreign ministers, Moines said that the effects of the war in Ukraine have already reached Latin America. She expects these ravages to continue whether or not the flag of peace is raised. Borrell, for his part, welcomed the clear position that Latin America as a whole has had in condemning the Russian aggression against Ukraine. He also made a plea that all must work together in dealing with the unfavorable consequences of the war.
Families in Damascus wait for the arrival of their loved ones after Syrian authorities have freed 60 detainees since Sunday. Their release is in line with a presidential amnesty that covers terror-related convictions. Muhammad Ajam has two brothers who disappeared in 2011 and another two in 2016. He says he has been waiting and living in hope. Meanwhile, one mother awaits her two sons, who she says went to work and never came back. According to her, she has a feeling that seeing them again after a long time will make her lose consciousness. Some of these prisoners have been held for over a decade. President Bashar al-Assad has issued several amnesty decrees during the country's 11-year war, which broke out after the regime cracked down on mostly peaceful protesters. But human rights activists say the new decree issued on Saturday is the most comprehensive in relation to terrorism charges.
The family of Hotel Rwanda hero Paul Rusesabagina announced it had filed a $400 million lawsuit in the United States over his alleged abduction and torture. Rusesabagina is currently serving a 25-year prison term on terrorism charges after a trial his supporters described as a sham and riddled with irregularities. The family and his lawyers said in a statement, the complaint alleges that the government of Rwanda and high-ranking Rwandan officials conspired to facilitate and execute an elaborate plot to lure Paul Rusesabagina from his home in Texas to Rwanda, where he would be tortured and illegally detained for the remainder of his life. The lawsuit names the government of Rwanda, President Paul Kagame, and other figures, including the former justice minister and intelligence chief. Ruse Sabagina, then a Kigali hotel manager, is credited with saving hundreds of lives during the 1994 genocide, and his actions inspired the Oscar-nominated film Hotel Rwanda. He used his fame to denounce Kagame as a dictator and has been behind bars since his arrest in August 2020 when a plane he believed was bound for Burundi landed instead in Kigali. The family said Ruse Sabagina, who has a U.S. green card as well as Belgian citizenship, was tricked into traveling from his U.S. home with the promise of work in Burundi.
Our family has been doing everything possible to save our father's life. We have suffered. Our father has suffered. And every single day, we are afraid to receive a call that our father has taken his last breath. We have tried everything to follow in his footsteps, to follow his example, and to stand up for what is right.
His 25-year jail term was upheld by Rwanda's Court of Appeal earlier this month, a ruling his family says is effectively a death sentence for the ailing 67-year-old.
New Jersey in the United States has trashed the use of single-use plastic and paper bags. Ellen Aguilar has the story.
Beginning today, May 4th, Wednesday, all stores and food service businesses statewide are not allowed to use or provide single-use plastic and paper bags, even food containers and cups made out of styrofoam. The bill was signed into law in November 2020 by New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy. This is considered to be the strongest ban in the nation. Stores and consumers were given 18 months to prepare for this. The governor said plastic bags are one of the most problematic forms of garbage, leading to millions of discarded bags that stream annually into our landfills, rivers, and oceans, adding that this will help mitigate climate change and strengthen our environment for future generations.
We are aware of climate change. We have relied so much on plastics, and one way or the other, it ends up in the ocean, or it ends up harming wildlife. We know that it's not biodegradable. So developing countries have already started doing it, so why not we?
I honestly think it's a progressive action that we're doing. The only thing that I could think of is how am I going to pick up my dog's poop?
I would agree with banning plastic bags completely. Not so much paper bags, but plastic bags. Let's get rid of them. There's so many alternatives, reusable fabric bags or paper bags for that matter.
Though the ban is in effect, there are exceptions according to the Department of Environmental Protection, or DEP. These include bags that are used for raw meat and fish, produce, dry cleaning, newspapers, and prescription drugs, to name a few. Violators will be fined. Monies to be collected will go to Clean Communities Program Fund. Since plastic bags are out, shoppers should be prepared to either bring their own reusable bags or buy one from the counter, or better yet, carry their edibles and supplies without a bag. From New Jersey, USA, El Aguilar for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
States like California, Connecticut, Delaware, Hawaii, Maine, New York, Oregon, and Vermont have carried out a similar ban on single-use plastic bags.
The Mucuchi's frog lives in a small area of the Venezuelan Andes, and it might have a chance at surviving the threat of extinction. This unique frog measures just under 2 centimeters and is distinguished by shades of brown and copper, as well as small white dots on its sides. After biologists found out that the tiny amphibian's natural environment had practically disappeared, they were forced to find a way to protect and save this species. Although little is known about the habits of this frog, biologists reveal that the Mucuchi's frog is endemic to the area, unique in the world, and only occurs in that region. Those reasons alone are enough, they say, to move the community into action in order to keep the species from falling into extinction and restore its specific habitat. To date, some 24 captured adults have created about 100 tiny jumpers released into nature, doubling the previously known number of Mucuchi's frogs in the wild. Next up, bookings in home rental platform Airbnb hit a new high. Does this signal a travel rebound amid the pandemic? Vietnam's first world boxing champion battles poverty and sexism. And Taiwanese Star Wars fans celebrate May the 4th in costumes. All these and more when Mata ng Agila International returns.
And you are still tuned in to Mata ng Agila International. And now for business news. Bookings on Airbnb hit a new high in this year's first quarter, a fresh signal that travel demand stifled by the COVID-19 pandemic is being unleashed. Despite the Omicron surge and a persistent level of infections, Airbnb bookings for lodging and travel experiences have topped 102 million, thus setting a new quarterly record. Airbnb tells shareholders that guests are booking more than ever before and that it sees a strong sustained pent-up demand. The company's stock price rose more than 3% in after-market trades following the release of the earnings figures. The company also says revenue in the first quarter was $1.5 billion, up 70% from the same period a year earlier. The strong earnings come a week before a May 11 event at which Chief Executive Brian Chesky will announce what the company bills as the biggest change to Airbnb in a decade. The booking platform has found traction around the globe, but is fighting various regulatory challenges in several jurisdictions.
The vital tea exports of crisis-struck Sri Lanka have dropped to their lowest level in 23 years. The decline was pinned on its fertilizer ban and the war in Ukraine. According to Sri Lanka's customs data, this year's first quarter exports plunged to 63.7 million kilos, down from last year's 69.8 million kilos. Export earnings for the first quarter also declined to $287 million from $338 million. Tea is Sri Lanka's biggest export commodity, bringing in about $1.3 billion annually before the current economic downturn. But a bungled ban on fertilizer imports was introduced last year in a doomed effort to save foreign currency and avoid a debt default. In doing so, the growers were hit hard and production fell. Industry officials added that about 10% of Sri Lanka's tea exports had also been affected by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Both countries are top buyers of the island's aromatic black tea.
Starbucks suspended its outlook for fiscal 2022 as COVID lockdowns, inflation, and investments in its stores in China weighed on international sales. International same-store sales shrank 8%, dragged down by sharp declines in the company's second-largest market. Executives said 72% of the Chinese cities where it has cafes experienced outbreaks of the Omicron variant. This led to a sinking of 23% same-store sales in the quarter as the country reimposed lockdowns. Roughly a third of Starbucks stores in China are temporarily closed or only accepting mobile order and pay or delivery orders. Belinda Wong, a chair of Starbucks China, said that they expect an even greater impact on their third quarter results due to the timing of the Shanghai lockdown and the further resurgence of the virus in other cities, including Beijing. Last quarter, Starbucks said it expects GAAP earnings per share to fall by a range of 4 to 6% and adjusted earnings per share to rise by 8 to 10% during the fiscal year. Despite its suspension of fiscal outlook, the coffee giant opened 313 net new locations in the quarter.
British luxury car maker Aston Martin Lagonda named Amedeo Felisa, the former boss of Ferrari Envy, as its new CEO, succeeding Tobias Mowers, who will step down with immediate effect. Martin confirmed that Felisa, who is currently a non-executive director of the company and a veteran in the automotive industry, will also be appointed as executive director with immediate effect. Mowers will support the new leadership team until the end of July. Aston also named Roberto Fedeli, who is considered the creator of Ferrari's first hybrid supercar, as its chief technical officer. To deliver the next generation sports cars and lead the way to electrification, these two appointments will significantly strengthen the senior leadership team, according to the British company. Known as James Bond's car brand of choice, the company reported a wider pre-tax loss of £111.6 million for the first quarter, compared with a loss of £42.2 million a year earlier.
From her youth spent scraping a living on the streets, Win Thi Thuney battled poverty and sexist prejudice to become Vietnam's first world boxing champion. The 25-year-old scored an enormous upset over defending champion Etsuko Tada of Japan to claim the World Boxing Organization mini flyweight belt in October. It was a remarkable triumph for an athlete who rose from humble beginnings in a conservative society where women's participation in sport, especially combat events, is often sneered at.
Thì chỉ có những cái bà hàng xóm thì có quan tâm hơi quá xíu, là thì cứ qua nói với ngoại em là sao nó là con gái mà cho nó suốt ngày đi đấm đá rồi mai mốt ai lấy nó rồi này nọ, nhìn như con trai vậy á. Thì ngoại nói lại với em thì em cũng bình thường, em cũng nói với ngoại á là cái này là cái niềm yêu thích của con cứ tập thôi, còn họ muốn nói gì họ nói, ngoại đừng có để tâm làm gì. Thì bây giờ con sẽ cố gắng tập luyện để chứng minh cho họ thấy cái con đường mà con chọn nó sẽ tốt hơn là con đường của con cái họ chọn rất nhiều.
Nhi dedicated herself completely to her training, desperate to find a route out of her tough surroundings. Her unanimous points victory to dethrone the taller and more experienced Tada came as a shock even to Nhi. Despite the misogynistic attitudes about women like her, Nhi felt proud of herself and her country, and she will win in the international ring.
Trong cái đêm đó em cứ sung sướng đến em ngủ không được luôn mà. Em thức tới sáng luôn á. Xong rồi qua ngày hôm sau thì em vẫn dạng giống như là bữa đó là em vẫn giữ cái đai em ngủ luôn, em để cái đai kế bên em vậy nè. Xong ngày mai em mở mắt về em vẫn thấy nó ở kế bên em, thì em mới tin đó là sự thật, là em đã giành chiến thắng rồi. Nói chung là cái niềm tự hào, cái sự vui sướng nó không.
Meanwhile, the Biden administration said the WNBA superstar Brittany Griner is being wrongfully detained by the Russian government, a shift in language that indicates the U.S. will work more aggressively to secure her release. Griner's case is being handled by the Office of the U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Hostage Affairs, or SPEHA, led by Roger Carstens. The transfer to their office means more flexibility in efforts to negotiate her freedom, as they do not necessarily have to wait for Russian legal proceedings to play out. Carstens and his team played a major role in securing the release of U.S. Marine veteran Trevor Reed from Russia last week. A State Department spokesperson vowed to the public that the U.S. government will continue to undertake efforts to provide appropriate support to Ms. Griner and bring her home. A center for the Phoenix Mercury, Griner plays for the Russian team UMMC Ekaterinburg in the off-season. WNBA athletes frequently play overseas for teams that pay more than they earn in the U.S. She was arrested at an airport outside Moscow in February after authorities reportedly found vape cartridges containing hash oil in her luggage.
Dressed in their favorite characters, Star Wars fans walked the streets of Taipei, Taiwan to celebrate Star Wars Day, a commemorative day for the fans of the sci-fi film. May the 4th be with you is the catchphrase of the unofficial holiday, which is a pun on the movie's catchphrase, May the Force be with you. Now in its 7th year, the annual event went ahead despite of an upsurge of COVID-19 infections. Facial masks in public areas, however, remains mandatory. Dressed as a Tusken Raider, an event participant said it took him a month to make his costume. Another fan said no movie can ever surpass Star Wars, adding that no matter how old one is, it's so cool to have watched the epic space opera film.
Lee Dong-wook and Kim Bum will reprise their roles as brothers in the upcoming season of the popular fantasy drama Tale of the Nine-Tailed. Tale of the Nine-Tailed Season 2 will take place in 1938. The K-drama will resume as Lee Yoon is sucked back into the past to an era with more troubles as he struggles to return to the present day. Kim Bum will act as his brother Lee Rang. Though their differences have been cleared at the end of Season 1, the past presents a different dynamic in their relationship. A future-bound Lee Yoon will face a rebellious sibling in the new season. Season 2 will feature new faces as the Penthouse fame Kim So-yeon will be taking the female lead role as Ryu Hong-ju, and Ryu Kyung-soo will play Cheon Moo-young. Now the new season will premiere in 2023.
Good news for commuters in Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea. A new bus line is now operating on routes never serviced before. Echo Hortaleza Quinola reports.
The official launching of Edda City Bus commenced in the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation House, under the theme Lifting Transportation Standards in the National Capital District.
Port Moresby Governor Honorable Boris Barkov inaugurated his long-time project of having a city transportation for the residents of Port Moresby. He was grateful to the Road Transport Authority and the Ministry of Transportation for trusting him with this project. After many proposals and plannings, a sustainable, reliable, safe, and efficient transportation system have been fulfilled. The Edda City Bus is now out for the public to service routes which are currently unserved by the existing public utility buses. An initial 5 APEC buses now belong to the National Capital District. These buses will carry passengers to and from different selected routes within the city. A quick tour rummaging the city riding on the buses was experienced by the officials of the city together with Transport Secretary Roy Mumu and Road Traffic Authority Nelson Terema. The governor asked the citizens of Port Moresby to use these buses properly for the benefit of everyone and to set a high standard for better services in the city.
That can bring visitors to our city, tourists to our city, to iconic places in the city, such as National Museum, the Parliament House, Nature and Adventure Park, come to beautiful Erakonetlo. These are all in the plan of things. So that this service is not just for commuters. Of course, essentially for commuters, going to school, going to work, returning safely from school and work, but also here for the great outcome of our capital city. Corporates you can hire, all the tourist operators too, they can partner us to deliver great outcomes in that space as well. We have a long way to go to ensure transport system in the city are not only efficient but sustainable for our residents and also contributing to greater efficiency and successful economy. The incorporation of the technology system is ever changing and we need to get on board with the bus services like the rest of the world. The city deserves nothing less than as good as the rest of the world.
Public transport enables more people to travel together along designated routes. Let's make EDA City Bus our partner in exploring the beauty of Port Moresby. Eco Hortaleza Quinola, Mata ng Agila, Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea. Trusted, connected, on point.
Well, today is May 4. Let's find out what happened on this day in history. In 1929, Audrey Hepburn was born in Brussels, Belgium. The British actress was best known for her roles in Roman Holiday, Breakfast at Tiffany's, and My Fair Lady. The final years of her life were devoted to humanitarian work. In 1959, the first annual Grammy Awards were held. The winners included Frank Sinatra, Ella Fitzgerald, and the Kingston Trio. And in 1994, a lawmaker introduced the pun, "May the 4th be with you," on the floor of UK Parliament. He was referring to the "May the Force be with you," the guiding principle of the heroes in the wildly popular Star Wars movies. The pun has been repeated countless times since, to the extent that May 4 is now recognized as Star Wars Day.
And before we conclude tonight's broadcast, let us ponder on a quote from U.S. President John F. Kennedy. As we express our gratitude, we must never forget that the highest appreciation is not to utter words, but to live by them.
Well, May the 4th be with you, and Happy
And
Monthsary!
Happy Monthsary to us!
Well, that's a wrap for tonight's news. Catch the latest updates on our social media channels. I am CJ Hirro.
And I am Nina Ricci, Alagao, Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Ang susunod